DC, a property that has floundered around in the film space for more than a decade at this point, has finally rebooted its cinematic universe, with James Gunn becoming the new creative director behind the films. For their first outing, James Gunn played it safe and decided to go with their most safe superhero, Superman. This film is much different than what we've come to expect from DC in the 21st century. This film was light, colorful, and made little effort to play the story off as being gritty or realistic. General audiences loved it. I loved it. I thought everything about the film was refreshing to see in a genre that's been largely stagnant. But many cultural critics and commentators have come out to claim that the film is political, it's bad, and about every other criticism you could think of. To those people, I just have this to say to you. You simply didn't understand Superman. If you've become accustomed to the Snyder-directed DC films, you'll get some whiplash with how different this film is. I'll admit it, I didn't mind the Snyder movies, more than the average viewer at least, but it had undeniable issues that completely hindered the property. Snyder's films had a huge pacing issue for me. If you've had the pleasure of viewing the 4-hour Justice League Snyder cut, you may agree. Although there were some interesting concepts brought forth, the film largely consisted of disjointed exposition with characters that had little depth to them. I think the biggest enemy to anyone directing a superhero film is pacing. There can be exposition and long sequences of dialogue, but these things can't be delivered in a way that feels self-conscious. Marvel does something similar where the writers seem to have this addiction to explaining every little fantastical element of the world through some convoluted scientific explanation or massive plot point that they've largely overlooked until that moment. But really, the audience doesn't care. They don't need to learn how all of this superhero shit came to be. They just want to see it because it's a superhero movie, you know? We don't need to constantly retread every little real-world explanation for how this actually is theoretically possible. That's not to say that Superman doesn't have its fair share of exposition and dialogue. It's just done in a way that actually keeps the audience engaged, and it's never done in a way that feels like, I don't know, self-conscious, I guess. There's no plot device MacGuffin that the antagonist is after. There's no convoluted motivations. And greatest of all, the character of Superman is never betrayed as a plot device. In contrast to the Snyder movies, this Superman won't stoically gaze into the distance as a courthouse full of people bursts into flames. I think a lot of people have confused the lighter tone of this new Superman with lowering the bar for its storytelling. Many people argue that the humor in this movie cheapens the plot, but I felt it was done way more tastefully than most superhero movies coming out these days. Marvel is chock full of the most tension-killing, cheesy one-liners ever. In contrast, Superman's humor is actually baked into the dialogue in a way that feels somewhat naturalistic. Other than that, the most obvious change from the Snyder-directed DCEU is the casting. I thought everyone was spot on for their roles. Superman and Lois Lane were both cast perfectly, and I feel like they had a lot of on-screen chemistry with each other. Additionally, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor was a very inspired casting choice, and I feel like he stole the show in a lot of his scenes. If you haven't seen the film, I highly recommend you do, because for the rest of this video, I will be discussing pretty major plot points for the story. For the first time since The Batman starring Robert Pattinson, I felt that a superhero movie actually had something interesting to say regarding our culture. While many superhero movies will just sort of drift through their plot with little emotion, Superman consistently hit emotional beats that left me moved. I feel like my general disdain for cape flicks stems from the fact that I never actually feel anything when I'm watching the film. The action will be pretty entertaining at times, but I'll feel little connection to the characters or the themes being conveyed. Usually these types of superhero movies will end with an extremely on-the-nose resolution of the themes and deliver a completely half-hearted moral at the end. That was not the case with Superman, which did the legwork to connect the audience to both the characters and the themes at play. This film is, in my eyes, a rejection of everything that's wrong with the sort of culture that's been cultivated by the digital age and social media. The main conflict of the film stems from Lex Luthor misleading the media into characterizing Superman as evil. Luthor breaks into the Fortress of Solitude and blackmails Superman with a message from his parents, leading the world to believe that Superman is an alien conqueror hell-bent on enslaving humanity and forming a harem of wives. Before we delve into the broader themes at play, I want to discuss how that conflict kind of reflects into Superman's relationship with Lois Lane. Lois Lane starts out the film as essentially the antithesis of what Superman stands for. She's guarded, untrusting, and judgmental, qualities that she attributes to her interest in punk rock and the scene associated with it. In contrast, Superman is earnest and believes in the natural good we are all capable of, something he argues is the real punk rock. And that line may sound like it would fall flat out of context, but it encapsulates the message of the film so perfectly that it plays very well in the scene that it's in. Lois Lane uses the media that she consumes as a way to partially shift the blame of her moral defects onto an outside source instead of taking responsibility for it. She judges Superman for enjoying what he considers to be punk music because that doesn't fit into what the media has told her punk rock is. She's an empty vessel for the media she consumes to take root in her and corrode her perspective on humanity. Superman is a stark contrast to this, who instead judges people based on their merit and not external sources. He likes music that some may consider cheesy, but he doesn't feel self-conscious about it, while Lois Lane's taste seems to solely stem from how it makes others perceive her. Lois Lane's perspective on media seems to be a very prevalent problem in Gen Z, who feels that the media they consume is synonymous with their identity. If you like this kind of music, you're this type of person. If you like Weezer, you're a weird loser, etc. And, that comment about Weezer may be true, but that doesn't change the fact that, this perspective cheapens one's ability to engage with art on a deep level. In addition, it cheapens one's ability to engage with themselves on a deep level. Instead of honestly engaging with a work of art, people only do so in order to have some sort of ironic take on it that they can use to reflect their identity. We shouldn't be letting things like movies or newscasts or TV shows define who we are as people. It should be our actions and our experiences that define us, not something as shallow as what entertainment we choose to consume. That's not to say that one cannot feel a deep connection to a work of art. Rather, they shouldn't let that connection be clouded by a desire to make it a defining feature of their identity. Lois's character arc concludes when she goes to Superman's childhood home while he rests up from a terrible battle that he just had. There, she realizes that his earnest and kind nature is just that. He isn't trying to trick anyone or trying to manipulate the way others perceive him. He's just trying to be a good person. In the digital age, being a good person is something that people are universally skeptical of. They question a good deed with almost more scrutiny than a bad one. The zeitgeist of our time is one of distrust, and any good deed is expected to have some sort of sinister or ulterior motive behind it. I know it may seem excessive to try and stick onto this punk rock point so hard, but it really is an important aspect to the themes of the movie. In fact, all characters of this film, to some degree, are influenced heavily by how others perceive them, which in most cases is directly at odds with the morally correct choice to make. This leads us to the other most important character of the film, Lex Luthor. As stated previously, Lex Luthor's entire goal is to trick the world into believing that Superman is evil. He does this by manipulating the media into seeing one very out-of-context perspective of the story, breaking into Superman's home to air out his personal business, and orchestrating atrocities to elicit a public reaction from Superman. To tie this point back into Lois Lane, she's a representative of how the average person engages with the world and things like the news and media. Everyone is quick to accept that Superman is evil because that's what the TV says, and none of them ever look at the actual merit of Superman's actions. All the public needed was one blemish on his perfect image, a blemish that he never even gets a chance to defend himself against. Luthor is a representative of how the media drives our country apart, and trains us to have this sort of schizophrenic response to any act of human decency. This leads to a corrosion of society on all levels. No one wants to act selflessly, and when they see those that do, they just wait for a mistake to prove that they're just as bad as everyone else. Although I've covered how others perceive Superman in this film, I think it's important to kind of highlight his true nature. Superman is time and time again proven to have an incorruptible will to do good. Horrific crimes are committed around him, like when Lex Luthor executes a man that he saved, and he still manages to have an unwavering faith in humanity. He's never cruel, even when cruelty would be justified the most. Outspoken critics of the film, such as NBA player Trae and political commentator Ben Shapiro, complained that Superman gets beat up too much in this movie, making him weak. I'd argue Superman's physical battles have never been an essential part of the character. Sure, it's fun to see his invulnerability and superhuman strength put on display, and epic battles, which he does do in this movie, but that's ignoring the most important part of his character. The real strength and the real battle in the film is the spiritual battle that Superman wages against Lex Luthor. He tries to do good, even when it's difficult. I'd say allowing Superman to lose a fight in the film is essential to conveying this theme with any weight. Superman is a guy who could just ruthlessly kill every single person in the movie that goes against him, but he doesn't want to do that. He wants to do the right thing. As a result, he often gets beat up because of it, because he's holding back. He's trying to do the right thing. He doesn't want to senselessly kill an entire country of people or senselessly kill Lex Luthor if he doesn't have to. I think this is sort of a good jumping off point for how others have perceived this film. Many political commentators have claimed that this film was making a political statement, although none of them can agree how. It's about immigration. It's about Ukraine. It's about Israel-Palestine. It's woke. Superman is woke. Superman is about none of those things, but what it is about is the people making these broad, sweeping claims. So much of the themes of the movie center around public perception and how it's manipulated by members of the media, both on a micro and macro level. The people who are up in arms about Superman, or at the very least highly critical of its content, are often the exact problem that the film rebukes. Let's take Ben Shapiro, for example.
Alrighty, folks, so I watched the new Superman, and I have many, many thoughts.
And I will give him credit. He knew that politicizing the film in his review would be a tough leg to stand on. He opens his review by stating that the film clearly isn't political at all, and that his problems with the film were actually a result of his deep analytical mind. He comes up with, quite frankly, very shallow criticisms of the movie. He would rather complain that Superman is weak and that the actors playing his parents are too ugly than actually applying any analysis to what the film is trying to say.
All the people who are getting super exercised over the politics, and we'll get to the politics a little bit later on. I think that they are overestimating how much politics is in this. His parents, Ma and Pa Kent, in the original, they are noble and they are wise. They're kind of salt of the earth. Here, they're basically kind of, I don't know, like down home types who don't seem to, they live in a kind of a crappy house.
And it's ironic because he prefaces his review by saying that he was analyzing it and that's why he didn't like it. After the climax of the film, a news clip plays on the TV in which a man says, "Whether you're conservative or liberal, we can all agree that Lex Luthor sucks." That is the most bluntly the film ever communicates its message. It's an invitation for us to step back from the political binary that we all operate in and actually reflect on what is objectively good and bad. Luthor's agenda in many ways mirrors the agenda of a political commentator. Although not as extreme as Luthor, they both stoke division and distrust for personal gain. Ben Shapiro and every other media personality with a take can come up with as many reasons as they want for not liking the film, but ultimately, they didn't like it because the joke's on them. On both sides of the aisle, a political commentator makes more money if they can stoke division among the American people. Controversy is how they drive traffic to their content. Superman is a film about rejecting the media's lies and the warped perceptions that it delivers us in favor of what's actually real. Love, the desire to do good, and one's actual actions, not just the entertainment they consume. That's why I love this movie. In a sea of films that are too self-conscious to do anything but toe the line of this hyper-ironic culture that we live in, Superman wears its heart on its sleeve, and it's not afraid to get a little cheesy if it can deliver a good message. The unwavering hope in the character of Superman, contrasted with the genuinely terrible things that he comes across, left me with a strong emotional connection to the story. We could all try to be a little bit like Superman, to take a step back from the news and from this political culture war that we all think is so important to wage, and to say, we're both human beings. You know, all this stuff on the TV is just that. It's just on the TV. You know, we could both bond and be good people without having to argue over all the lies that are spewed to us 24/7. To put it simply, whether you're liberal or conservative, we can all agree that Ben Shapiro sucks. In all seriousness, thank you for watching the video. If you haven't seen Superman, I recommend you go check it out. We have the links to my Twitter and my editor's Twitter in the comments. We also have a Patreon link if you want to support the channel. All of that money will just go toward increasing the production value and things like that for the channel. Otherwise, I hope you guys all have a great day. See you next time.
The Ivory Door.